I stood alone by my mother-in-law's bedside when she passed away. From other rooms came the comforting murmur of supportive families, but around me, only silence. No husband, no friends, no calls, not even an apology. When the doctor pronounced the time of death, the nurse handed me her final letter. Inside were names, a key, and one chilling instruction. "Good day, friends. Brew some tea. This is going to be an interesting story. I hope you enjoy listening." I stood by her bed when the monitor beside her head emitted a long, steady tone. Not a sharp beep, not the dramatic siren you hear in films. Just a quiet, drawn-out beep. 3:42 p.m. Tuesday. She was gone, peacefully. No final words, no farewell. I held her hand. It was already growing cold. And suddenly I realized I was alone, completely alone. The room fell into silence. In nearby wards there was noise, someone laughing, people saying their goodbyes or celebrating recoveries. Hugs, doctors thanked, children with balloons and teddy bears, but not here. No Alex, no his sister, no calls, no texts, not even a fake excuse. We're stuck in traffic. The nurse, a woman in her 30s, stepped into the doorway, neat, tired, but with real sympathy in her eyes. She'd clearly seen death before, but hadn't yet become numb to it. "Emily, are you okay?" she asked gently, clutching a clipboard to her chest. I nodded. Speaking was impossible. My throat was dry, my jaw clenched. "They said they'd come," I whispered, barely moving my lips. "My husband, his sister, they promised." She looked at me with quiet understanding. She had seen it all, how I stayed here for 3 days straight, calling, texting, begging, at first calmly, then with rising desperation. How I looked up every time footsteps echoed in the hallway. "You know, not everyone knows how to say goodbye," she said softly. But we both knew it wasn't about knowing how, it was a choice. They chose not to come. I sank into the chair by the bed, the same spot I hadn't left in days. That's when the nurse pulled a small crumpled envelope from her pocket. "She asked me to give you this. Only you. Only after..." She hesitated. "Well, you understand." She was very insistent. My name was written on the envelope in her neat, slightly angular handwriting. Even illness hadn't taken away the clarity of her letters. I tore it open carefully. Inside was a key, old, slightly rusted, and a slip of paper. On it, an address, and one single line: "They didn't love me. Let them now know what it feels like to be forgotten." A chill ran down my spine. Those words weren't just bitter. They carried something deeper, something colder. "Are you all right?" the nurse asked, noticing the color drain from my face. "Yes," I said quickly, folding the note and tucking it away. Just her last thoughts. Once the paperwork was done, I gathered her belongings. Her nightgown, glasses, a paperback novel. They didn't feel like objects anymore. They felt sacred, deeply personal. Outside, the sun shone brightly. Someone was carrying flowers. A family loaded a baby into a car seat. Life went on. But for me, everything stood still. I sat in my car, engine running, but didn't drive. I just sat. 20 minutes, maybe 30. I don't remember. Her image filled my mind. Her silence in the last days. That look in her eyes, like she wanted to say something but held back. The traffic light turned red. I glanced at my phone. No messages from Alex. Not a single word from his sister. Just 3 missed calls from work. When I got home, the phone finally rang. It was Alex. "Hey," he said casually. "Are you almost done? Everything's pretty much wrapped up here. Pick up some bread and milk on your way." I gripped the kitchen counter. "Your mother died today," I said calmly. Long silence. "When?" 3:42 p.m. You'd have known if you'd answered a single one of my calls. Look, I had meetings. It's not like I meant to. You know how she was. Difficult. I ended the call. No yelling. No reply. Just a click. The house I returned to no longer felt like home. Just a box filled with furniture. Bills on the table. Newspapers. All meaningless. But in my hand, I held the key, as if it meant something important, like the beginning of something. I tossed and turned all night. He came home late, slipped into bed without a word. Left early in the morning, didn't even glance my way. At 7, I got up, showered, got dressed. I entered the address from the note into the GPS, and I drove. I wasn't thinking, I just went. About 30 kilometers out, the road narrowed. Branches scratched at the hood. The path wound through a dense thicket. Almost at the end, rusty gates, a barely visible sign. Behind it, an old wooden house. The paint peeling, the windows cloudy, walls overgrown with wild roses. And yet, it felt alive. The key fit perfectly. Click. The door creaked open. The smell of dust, old books, lavender. The house wasn't dead, just asleep, waiting. On the kitchen table was another envelope. To be opened only after my death. Deliver to my lawyer. I realized this house had been her secret, her real home. And for some reason, she trusted it to me. I sat at the kitchen table in this strange, silent house, surrounded by dust and the scent of aged paper. Outside, rose branches scratched at the glass. On the table, her envelope, addressed to Elizabeth Morgan, attorney at law. Below, her downtown office address. I found the number right away. My hands trembled as I dialed. Law offices of Elizabeth Morgan. How can I help you? Hi, my name is Emily Thompson. My mother-in-law, Margaret Bennett, passed away yesterday. She left behind an envelope addressed to you. Pause. Then her voice softened. Emily, I was waiting for your call. My condolences. Margaret was a difficult but wise woman. Can we meet tomorrow morning? There are matters we need to discuss in person. Of course. Should I bring anything? Definitely bring the envelope. And one more thing. She insisted everyone mentioned in the will be present. That includes your husband and his sister. I hesitated. Hearing their names again felt strange, bitter. All right, I'll arrange it. That evening, I returned home. He was sprawled on the couch, watching sports highlights. Didn't even turn his head. Where have you been? He asked without looking up. I stood in the doorway, the key to another life heavy in my coat pocket. I was handling your mother's funeral. Alone. On your own? You didn't even call. He muted the TV. Don't start, Emily. You know it was complicated between us. Tomorrow we're meeting with her lawyer. The will is being read. You and Rachel need to be there. He smirked. A will? You can't be serious. She made everything very clear, I said. You'll see for yourself. He waved dismissively. Fine, I'll call Rachel. Let's see what kind of show this is. The next day, we arrived together, but in complete silence. Rachel was already waiting outside the building. Tall, smoking, annoyed expression. I wore a plain sweater and coat, my hair tied back. I felt like an outsider among them. They were blood, but not family. We entered the office. It was tidy, wooden furniture, stacks of papers, an orchid by the window. At the desk sat Elizabeth Morgan herself, stern but kind-eyed. She immediately took control of the room. Two older women were already seated. I recognized them, Margaret's old friends, Aunt Grace and Aunt Linda. I'd seen them once in photos. Thank you for coming, the lawyer began. I've worked with Margaret Bennett for over a decade. Shortly before her passing, she revised her will. Everything here is officially notarized. My husband yawned. Rachel rolled her eyes. "Let's get on with it," she muttered. Elizabeth adjusted her glasses and opened the folder. To her son, Charles Bennett, she paused. She leaves forgiveness. I quote, "You don't deserve a penny, but I forgive you, not for your sake, but for mine." Silence. Charles leaned forward. "Is this a joke?" "It's all properly recorded and signed," the lawyer replied calmly. To her daughter, Rachel Bennett, she leaves her wedding ring. Quote, "You once said you wanted it. Let it remind you that promises are meant to be kept." Rachel paled. Her lips pressed into a tight line. To her friends, Grace Williams and Linda Patterson, 300,000 each, and gratitude for their care in her final months. The two women exchanged glances. One of them coughed, clearly overwhelmed. "And to Emily Thompson," Elizabeth looked up at me, "she leaves everything else. The country home, all bank accounts, insurance payouts, personal belongings." The air vanished from the room. "This is insane," Rachel snapped. "She barely knew her. Who even is Emily?" "I'm her daughter-in-law," I replied calmly, "and the only one who stayed." Charles jumped up. "We'll contest this. She wasn't in her right mind." Elizabeth pulled out another document. Margaret Bennett underwent a psychiatric evaluation 1 week before amending her will. She was completely sound of mind. "And," she added, "she left a video explaining her decisions. If needed, it can be presented in court." Charles fell back into his seat, silent. "Any questions?" asked the lawyer. "None. Then everyone else is dismissed. Emily, please stay. There's more." When Charles and Rachel stormed out, slamming the door, Elizabeth reached into a drawer and pulled out another envelope. Worn, labeled in neat handwriting, "For Emily," to be read after the will. "She asked me to give you this personally," she said you'd understand. My hands trembled as I opened the letter. One paragraph. "Don't forgive anyone. Let them beg. Let them crawl. And you, stay silent, smile, and walk away." I folded the paper and slipped it into my purse. Elizabeth looked at me closely, with real empathy. "She didn't choose you just as her heir," she said. "She chose you as her final strength, her voice." When I stepped outside, Charles was standing by the car, fists clenched. Rachel had already left. He glanced at me, then looked away. I said nothing. Just got into my own car and drove. Not home, to that house. The one that now, by law and by will, was mine. The house greeted me with silence, but no longer the oppressive kind. It was quiet, with intention, almost as if it knew its owner had returned, not Margaret, but the one she had chosen. I changed clothes, lit a fire in the hearth, brewed some tea, and went up to the attic, searching for pieces of her life. Beneath layers of dust, I found a box. Inside, old letters tied with ribbons and dated notebooks. Her diaries. Margaret had written for years. Her handwriting was neat, her lines straight. I opened the last notebook. Today marks 7 years since Boris passed. Charles only calls when he needs money. Rachel doesn't visit. She's ashamed of my clothes. But Emily, she stays, not out of pity, but from decency. As I read, a different woman came to life. Not the cold mother-in-law I thought I knew, but someone strong, perceptive, worn down by loneliness. The holiday came and went. No one showed. I still set 4 plates, out of habit. I knew I'd eat alone, but I set them anyway. The tears came on their own. I was holding her pain in my hands, silent, enduring pain, built over years. That night, I barely slept. Rage, compassion, respect, fear, all of it swirled inside me. At dawn, I went back upstairs. Under the bed, I found another box. Inside, letters from Boris, her late husband. One in particular was worn, the envelope marked, "To my Margaret, if I'm gone." I opened it. The ink had faded, the handwriting shaky, but unmistakably his. "If you're reading this, then I'm gone. Margaret, our children drifted from us, not all at once, but through 1,000 little betrayals. Don't reward them for that. Please, I know you'll doubt yourself, but I beg you, leave your heart to someone who's earned it, even if it's not them." More tears, but this time, not just grief, understanding. That her decision wasn't made in anger. It was years in the making, a hard, deliberate act of truth, and I was now a part of it. 2 days later, Charles called. "Hey, how are you holding up?" His voice, too soft, artificial. "Busy. There's a lot to do," I answered. "I was thinking maybe we could get away for a bit. Just us. Remember the old times?" I said nothing. "I even made dinner. Lasagna. Your favorite." "No," I said simply. "I'm staying here tonight." "In the house?" "Yes." "Okay. Well, think about it." He hung up. I stood at the window staring out at the empty road, and I felt it. Something inside me had changed. I wasn't who I used to be. A few days later, I received a court summons. Charles and Rachel were suing. They claimed Margaret had been mentally unstable, that I had influenced her unfairly. And somehow, I could hear her voice from the other side, chuckling. She had seen this coming. I called Elizabeth Morgan immediately. Her voice was calm, steady. "Don't worry, we're prepared. Margaret was a sharp woman. We have everything we need, psychiatric reports and recordings." "Recordings?" I asked. She asked for them herself. Audio logs, her thoughts, her conversations with them, all with timestamps and dates. 2 days later, we sat in Elizabeth's office and played them. Margaret's voice was frail but clear. Rachel came by. First time in 6 months. Sat down, whined about work, scrolled through her phone. When I mentioned the CT results, she said, "Oh, I have a meeting," and left. Didn't even finish her tea. Then asked for Mom's earrings, said, "Well, you're not going to need them much longer." Elizabeth paused the audio. "There are dozens of these," she said, and signed consent for each. And for the first time in weeks, my heart loosened. I wasn't alone. I had the truth. And the voice of the woman everyone abandoned, except me. The courtroom was small and stuffy. Charles sat with a stiff expression next to his attorney, a young, balding man who kept rifling through his papers. Rachel was in the back, dressed in black, sunglasses on, trying to disappear. When I walked in with Elizabeth Morgan, Charles looked at me, not just with anger, hatred. I met his gaze, calm, unafraid. Their lawyer started. "This will was made under duress. Our client was suffering cognitive decline. She was isolated, manipulated." He spoke with force, confidence, until Elizabeth rose to speak. She laid the documents before the judge. "This is the psychiatric evaluation. Signed, sealed. Margaret Bennett was fully competent. And here," she held up a flash drive, "is her voice. She knew what she was doing, and why." The judge played a couple of clips. Margaret's voice filled the room. Her words were slow, but lucid, unmistakable. The room was silent. The hearing lasted less than an hour. Case dismissed. All assets remain with Emily Thompson. Plaintiffs are ordered to cover court fees. Rachel stormed out, nearly knocking over a chair. Charles stayed seated, pale as chalk. A week later, a local newspaper ran a short but punchy piece. Disputed will of prominent county resident upheld in court. Family challenge fails. And that's when it all began. Rachel's neighbors stopped speaking to her. The small store she worked at asked her to take a leave of absence. Her boyfriend vanished from all social media. Charles had to put his business up for sale. Without his mother's credit cosign, the bank froze his financing. 2 weeks later, I returned to our old house to collect my things. Charles was in the kitchen, a half-empty glass of whiskey in his hand. "Happy now?" he said bitterly. "You destroyed me. Even from the grave, she picked you over her own son." I set the box I was holding on the table. "Your mother made the choice. I simply didn't get in the way." He got up, came closer. "You think you've won. You just played the victim. You knew she was weak. You fed her attention." "I didn't play anything," I interrupted. "You chose who to be, for her and for me." I walked past him, up the stairs, gathered the last of my papers and personal things. On my way out, I left the house key on the shelf. "I'll be living in Margaret's house now. That's my home." "Good luck," I added, already halfway through the door. "Our lawyers will be in touch." His face twisted with something I couldn't quite name. He couldn't grasp how I had become like this. Firm, composed, decisive. But I hadn't become anything new. I had just stopped being convenient. Margaret's house, now mine, became my refuge. Each evening, I lit up rooms that had known only dust and silence. I swept out cobwebs, scrubbed old tiles, planted fresh flowers beneath the windows. And each day I could almost hear her voice, not judging, but approving. "You're doing it right." One afternoon, while cleaning the upstairs bedroom, I discovered a chest beneath the bed. Old, wooden, with iron hinges. Inside, dozens of letters, yellowed envelopes tied with ribbons. A lifetime of correspondence between Margaret and Boris. Reading them, I felt like I was peeking into a life of love and quiet tragedy. "Our children became strangers, Margaret. Not from one mistake, but from thousands of tiny betrayals. Don't leave them everything. Don't repay indifference with sacrifice. Let them know what mattered." And I understood. Her will wasn't revenge. It was the outcome of years of pain, a deeply thought-out final act of clarity. A week passed. I didn't call Charles. He didn't call me either. But the following Monday, I got a call from a hidden number. Without thinking, I answered. "Emily, it's Rachel. I'm not calling to fight, everything's falling apart. I got fired. My boyfriend left. Can you help me, please?" "No," I answered firmly. "Why?" Her voice rose in desperation. "You're not like us. You're kind. You always cared. You always—" "And that's exactly why I don't anymore," I said calmly. "Especially not for those who stood next to Margaret and looked right through her." I ended the call. Then I pulled out the final letter, given to me by Elizabeth Morgan after the court case. "Forgive no one. Let them beg. Let them crawl. And when they finally do, smile and turn away." Spring came early that year. I realized something then. The house shouldn't stay silent. Margaret had dreamed of laughter here, conversations, life. She'd written it in her diaries, how she wanted to invite neighbors over for tea, how she wanted to open the doors to the lonely, but she'd always postponed it until it was too late. But it wasn't too late for me. I spoke to Elizabeth Morgan again, and together we started the paperwork to register a foundation. That's how the Hope House Center was born. Its mission was simple: to help elderly people who'd been left behind, to organize gatherings, shared meals, offer support to widows, to women abandoned by their families, to give a voice to those no one listened to. Within a few months, a hand-carved wooden sign hung above the door: Hope House. At the opening event, dozens of people came. Some brought homemade pies, others old photos. Some just sat quietly in a corner. But they were there because someone had thought to invite them. One woman, Antonia Parker, said softly, "I knew her, you know, Margaret, back when her husband was alive. She was kind back then. Only later." She didn't finish, just looked at me. "You're like her continuation." I nodded, my throat tightened. Yes, I was her continuation. A week later, Charles showed up. I heard the doorbell ring and stepped outside. He stood at the gate, disheveled suit jacket, eyes hollow. "We need to talk," he muttered. I stepped through the gate and closed it behind me. He would not cross the threshold. Not here. "I'm in trouble," he said. "The bank's pulling my credit. The business is collapsing. I just need $5,000, just for a month. I'll pay it back." I looked at him and saw him clearly for the first time. "Do you remember what you said about your mother?" I asked. "That she was never easy? That she didn't deserve better?" "She still loved you," I added, "even after everything." "I know," he whispered. "And now you're here. And I'm not going to save the people who drowned her." I turned and walked back inside. Didn't look back. And as if in quiet approval, an old floorboard on the porch creaked under my step. Margaret's voice, unspoken, echoed behind me. Months passed. The Hope House Center found its rhythm. Wednesday night dinners for the lonely, game club on Fridays, and on Sundays, Silence Day, a space to just sit, drink tea, and be beside someone else who wasn't expected anywhere. I no longer felt empty. If anything, I had never felt so full, so alive. A local newspaper featured us in a short article. One house, hundreds of stories, how a widow brought hope to the forgotten. And one afternoon, as I had come to expect peace, my phone rang again. "Charles." "I'm nearby. Can we talk?" I paused, then replied, "Meet me by the oak tree, behind the house." There was a bench there. He arrived, sat next to me, silent. He looked different, thinner, worn, his face older. "You know," he began, "I've tried to fix things, tried to change. I even went to a priest, a therapist. Depends on what you believe in, I guess. But everything circles back to you, because you didn't give up. And I did." I didn't speak. "I started another business with a partner. It crashed. We got scammed. I'm driving for a rideshare now." "Good luck," I said flatly. He turned toward me. "You've changed. You're harder now." "No, Charles," I said. "I just stopped being easy to step on." He sighed. "Say one thing then. Have you forgiven me?" I looked into his eyes. Calm. Steady. "Have you ever asked for forgiveness?" He didn't answer, just stood up and walked away. And I knew without question that he'd never come back. I later heard about Rachel through someone we both used to know. She was working night shifts at a 24-hour diner, kept to herself, didn't speak to anyone, ate lunch in silence, eyes locked on her phone. I didn't feel pity, and I didn't rejoice either. I just let go. That fall marked 1 year since Margaret passed. We organized a remembrance evening at Hope House. We hung her photo, the one where she's laughing, holding Boris's hand. Everyone lit a candle. I said a few words. When I first came to this house, it was full of silence. Now it's full of life. Margaret dreamed of this. She believed in kindness, but above all, she left us strength. The strength to choose those who choose us, and to let go of those who left long ago, but still live in our heads. That evening, for the first time, I felt complete, like everything that was meant to happen had happened. That winter, I got an email from an editor at a publishing house. "I heard about your center," she wrote. "Your story is powerful. Would you consider writing a book?" And I did, not for recognition, for Margaret. The book was published under the title, "The Letter That Gave Me Strength." At the launch event, I said one simple thing: we can be betrayed, forgotten, but if we hold on to even a drop of love, we can survive. And maybe, if we're lucky, build something greater. In the center's main room now hang 3 photographs: Margaret, Boris, and a group photo of all of us, the volunteers, the visitors, the lives she never knew, but whose lives are now changed because of her. I often walk out to the oak tree behind the house. I sit on the bench, watch the wind move the leaves, and I whisper, "You were never truly gone, and now neither am I."